All right, welcome to your deep dive. You sent us this episode of the X-22 report, episode 33495, so we know you're interested to see what all the buzz is about with this recent election.
Yeah, it aired on November 8th, 2024.
Right after the election.
Lots of claims in here about the election, the economy,
Oh,
and this idea of a deep state. So
yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
definitely. But we're going to analyze the arguments and see how they connect to some of the bigger trends we're seeing
Exactly.
in politics and the economy, of course.
So the host, who calls himself Dave,
Right.
he really lays out this almost apocalyptic vision of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, like on the brink of total collapse.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back.
No, he claims it's all part of a deliberate plan by this deep state that he talks about.
And this deep state, who exactly does he include in that?
Well, he points to groups like the Federal Reserve, corrupt politicians, and he even mentions the World Economic Forum.
Wow.
It's quite a mix.
It's interesting, though, because he sees Trump as the key to, reversing all of this.
Yeah, he paints this picture of a golden age under Trump's leadership, with U.S. manufacturing booming again,
Right.
fuel prices super low.
Like rock bottom.
Exactly, and a
Ugh.
much, much smaller government.
He also mentions some groundbreaking new technologies emerging, right?
Yeah, he throws that in there too, but doesn't really elaborate on what those might be.
Okay, so smaller government, booming economy.
Right.
Sounds pretty good, but how does he propose to get there?
Well, he gets pretty radical with his suggestions.
Like how?
He's talking about abolishing the Federal Reserve,
Wow.
getting rid of income tax altogether.
Seriously?
Yeah, and dismantling most government departments.
I mean, wouldn't abolishing the Fed just throw the entire global financial system into chaos?
It would be a monumental shift, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The Fed plays such a crucial role in managing the U.S. economy, setting interest rates,
Right.
controlling the money supply, so abolishing it would be a huge gamble.
Some people might argue that it would lead to more economic freedom, though, right?
You definitely hear that argument.
Uh.
But the potential for instability, even damage to the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Exactly.
So if he's getting rid of income tax and shrinking the government, where's all the money going to come from?
He talks a lot about oil sales and tariffs.
Right. Tapping into those resources.
Yeah. But it's not clear if that would be enough to cover all the essential services that the government provides.
Like what?
Well, think about defense, healthcare, education.
It's a lot.
It is. And eliminating income tax would require a complete overhaul of the U.S. tax system.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the debates that would spark.
Oh, absolutely. It's a hot button issue.
No kidding.
And then you've got the role he sees for Elon Musk in all of this.
Yeah, he's a big fan.
He is. He suggests Musk could be the key to downsizing the government.
He even throws out numbers like 70 to 80% cuts.
Yeah, which would be mind-blowing, completely reshaping the federal government as we know it.
He compares it to,
Argentina's President Milei.
yeah, right, who also made huge cuts.
Right, but it's important to remember, the government bureaucracy does serve a purpose.
Definitely.
I mean, it provides those essential services we were just talking about.
Right, like healthcare, education.
Exactly. And it regulates industries, ensures the safety and well-being of citizens.
So downsizing too drastically could have some pretty negative unintended consequences.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
And then there's this whole idea of a deep state that he keeps just coming back to.
Right. It seems to be at the core of his worldview.
Yeah, he uses it to explain everything from the economic problems to these alleged assassination attempts against Trump.
So it's worth asking, what is the deep state? Is it real or just a conspiracy theory?
Yeah, because he throws that term around a lot, but never really defines it.
Exactly. So we need to dig into that a bit more and see if there's any evidence to support these claims.
Okay, so we've got economic collapse, a golden age under Trump,
Right.
concerns about energy security, this mysterious deep state.
It's a lot to unravel.
What else does Dave cover in this episode?
Well, he also spends quite a bit of time talking about election integrity.
Which is a huge topic these days.
Absolutely. And even though Trump was declared the winner in this election, Dave still alleges widespread manipulation.
Really?
Yeah, he's a big advocate for this SAVE Act, which is a set of proposed electoral reforms.
Right, aimed at preventing voter fraud.
Exactly.
And we've heard a lot about that lately.
It's definitely gaining traction among certain groups.
But it's important to, really understand what it entails.
Absolutely.
And to look at the evidence or lack thereof behind these claims of voter fraud.
Right, because that's where we need to separate fact from speculation.
Definitely.
And really look at the bigger picture of the conversation around election security.
Okay, so he's claiming there was election manipulation even though his candidate won.
Yeah, and he even goes so far as to say that Biden's victory speech
Uh-huh.
was intentionally written to downplay concerns about election integrity and prevent this SAVE Act from passing.
So he's basically saying Biden is part of this system that's rigged against Trump.
That's how he's framing it. And he also drops this bombshell about an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he cites an indictment against two individuals allegedly hired by Iran to carry out the hit.
Hold on a second. Iranian assassins. This is getting a bit wild.
It does sound like something out of a spy movie, but it's important to remember that an indictment doesn't equal guilt.
Of course.
And even if these individuals were involved, it doesn't automatically mean the Iranian government was behind it.
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle that we're missing.
Definitely.
And it's important not to jump to conclusions.
Exactly. We need to be cautious about drawing any firm conclusions without all the facts.
But he doesn't just stop there with the conspiracy theories, right?
Oh no, he's just getting started.
Like, what else does he throw out there?
He claims the FBI was sending racist text messages to try and instigate a race war.
Seriously, what would be the purpose of that?
Well, according to Dave, the FBI is part of this deep state, and they were hoping to create chaos and division to undermine Trump.
But wouldn't that completely backfire on them? I mean, wouldn't that just damage their credibility even more?
Logically, you'd think so, but that's how he sees it.
Okay, and then there's the Venezuelan spies.
Ah, yes. He alleges that Venezuelan intelligence operatives were sent to the U.S. to target Trump's political opponents.
Okay, so we've got economic doom, election fraud, Iranian assassins, a racist FBI, and Venezuelan spies.
All in one episode.
Is there anything else he manages to squeeze in there?
Oh, there's plenty more. He even brings up Hunter Biden's upcoming sentencing
Okay.
and speculates on the possibility of a pardon from Trump.
Interesting.
He claims the deep state is panicking over Trump's victory and the potential exposure of their activities.
Like they're afraid Trump is going to blow the lid off their whole operation.
Exactly. And he even hints at these incriminating lists like the Epstein client list and something called Diddy.
Diddy, what's that?
He doesn't really explain it, so we're left to wonder what he's referring to.
So, according to Dave, the deep state is terrified of Trump.
Yeah, he makes it sound like they're running scared.
But is there any actual evidence to back up any of these claims?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what we need to analyze as we go deeper into this episode.
Right, because the idea of a deep state with this much power and influence is a pretty big claim.
It is, and it raises a lot of questions.
Like, is there really a hidden network controlling things behind the scenes?
Or is this more of a way to explain away complex events by blaming unseen forces?
It's definitely a compelling narrative.
It is, and it appeals to people who feel like they're not being heard.
Like their concerns are being ignored.
Exactly, and that can make them more susceptible to these kinds of ideas.
Okay, so we got a lot to unpack here. Economic meltdown, election manipulation, assassination plots.
Don't forget the racist FBI and the Venezuelan spies.
Oh, yeah. Can't leave those out.
And of course, this shadowy deep state lurking in the background.
Where do we even begin to make sense of all of this?
Well, I think a good place to start is by looking at Dave's claims about hypocrisy among liberals.
Okay, like what specifically?
He points to things like calls for gun control after previously advocating for gun rights.
Right, like they've flipped their position.
Exactly. And he also talks about this sudden push for censorship after Trump's win.
He gives the example of CNN's Van Jones calling for social media regulation.
Yeah, he uses that as evidence of this supposed shift in their thinking.
So it's not just about what Dave's saying,
Right.
but also how it fits into this larger political landscape.
Exactly. And that's what makes this episode so interesting.
It's like a window into a particular worldview.
One that's shaped by distrust, conspiracy theories, and this belief in alternative narratives.
It's definitely a lot to process, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
We've just started our deep dive. There's much more to come.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue to explore these claims and try to make sense of this complex and often confusing world. So we've got this whole web of conspiracy theories, economic forecasts, and, election controversies.
Yeah, a lot going on.
Let's try to untangle some of it.
Okay, sounds good.
Starting with this idea of a golden age under Trump.
Right, he paints a pretty rosy picture.
Yeah, what exactly would that look like, according to Dave?
Well, he talks about a, reinvigorated American economy, bringing
Right.
manufacturing back
Right.
and achieving, energy independence.
And that combined with lower fuel prices is supposed to lead to this widespread prosperity.
Yeah, that's the idea.
But is that really how economies work? I mean, it seems a little oversimplified to just say bring back manufacturing and everything will be great.
You're right to be skeptical. It's definitely more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Global trade is really complex,
Yeah.
and a lot of factors contribute to economic success. Well, you've got things like labor costs, infrastructure, access to global markets. It's not just about making things here.
And what about abolishing the Federal Reserve? I mean, that's a pretty radical proposal.
Yeah, that's definitely a fringe idea, even among, those who advocate for limited government.
Right.
The Fed has such a huge impact on the economy, setting interest rates, controlling the money supply.
So abolishing it would have, like, massive consequences.
Yeah, both positive and negative.
Uh-huh.
Some people argue it would limit government power, lead to tons of dollars or money.
But others worry about economic instability, damage to the dollar.
Exactly, it's a big gamble.
He also mentions eliminating income tax.
Yeah, which sounds great on the surface.
Right. Who wouldn't want that?
But the question is, how would the government function without that revenue?
Exactly. Where would the money come from?
He suggests relying mainly on tariffs and oil sales.
Okay.
But it's unclear if that would be enough to cover things like defense, healthcare, education.
So all the essential services.
Yeah, right. Eliminating income tax would require a complete overhaul of the entire system.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
Definitely.
It seems like this idea of a much smaller government is really central to Dave's vision here.
Yeah, he's all about shrinking the size and scope of government.
He believes Elon Musk could be the guy to make it happen.
Right. He even suggests cuts of like 70 to 80%.
Which is just mind-boggling.
It would be a complete transformation.
He compares it to, I think it was Argentina's president,
President Milei, yeah.
who drastically reduced the size of government.
Right. But we have to remember that, government bureaucracy serves a purpose.
For sure.
It provides essential services, regulates industries, ensures safety.
So you can't just slash and burn without considering the consequences.
Exactly. There could be some serious unintended consequences to downsizing too drastically.
This deep state idea that Dave keeps talking about,
It pops up a lot.
it seems to be at the heart of his worldview.
He uses it to explain so much of what he sees happening in the world.
But what exactly is it? Like, is it a real thing or just a conspiracy theory?
That's a great question, and it's one that's sparked a lot of debate.
Yeah.
Some
Okay.
people argue that it's a genuine phenomenon,
Okay.
referring to a network of, unelected officials, bureaucrats, who hold a lot of power behind the scenes.
Okay.
They believe this group works to undermine elected leaders
Interesting.
and advance their own agendas, regardless of who's in office.
So like a shadowy group pulling the strings.
Exactly. But others argue that the deep state is more of a myth.
Like a way to oversimplify things.
Yeah, and assign blame to these unseen forces
Mhm.
instead of, looking at the complex realities of how things actually work.
It does seem like a way to make sense of a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable.
Right. For those who subscribe to this narrative, it offers a sense of order.
Like there's a reason behind the chaos.
Exactly. Even if that reason is this sinister conspiracy.
Let's look at some of the specific conspiracy theories he brings up.
Okay, because some of them are pretty out there.
He claims there was an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump.
Right. He cites this indictment against 2 individuals,
Uh-huh.
allegedly hired by Iran to carry out the hit.
But like you said before, an indictment doesn't equal guilt.
Right. And even if those individuals were involved, it doesn't necessarily implicate the Iranian government.
It seems like a big leap to make.
It is, and we just don't have enough information to draw any definitive conclusions.
And then he claims that the FBI was sending racist text messages to incite a race war.
Yeah, that was another one that caught my attention.
What would be the motivation behind that?
He suggests that the FBI is part of this deep state
Okay.
and that they were trying to create chaos and division to make Trump look bad.
But wouldn't that backfire? I mean, inciting racial violence would just undermine the FBI's credibility even more.
You'd think so, but according to Dave, that was their plan.
Okay, and then there's the Venezuelan spies.
Right. He alleges that Venezuela is sending operatives to the U.S. to target Trump supporters.
He cites a report about Venezuela neutralizing political opponents.
Yeah, but we don't know how reliable that report is.
Or who these supposed targets are.
Exactly. And what evidence they have to support this claim.
It does all seem a bit far-fetched.
A little bit, yeah.
He also mentions a raid on the home of Alfie Oakes, a Trump supporter.
Right. He suggests it was part of a crackdown on Trump allies.
But again, we need more context. So, like,
Absolutely.
why was the raid conducted?
Were there legitimate law enforcement concerns?
Without that information, it's easy to spin it as part of a conspiracy.
Exactly. And that's what we need to be careful of, not jumping to conclusions without all the facts.
So we've covered the economic predictions, this deep state concept, and some pretty wild conspiracy theories.
A lot of ground to cover.
What's the takeaway from all of this?
Well, it's clear that Dave is presenting a very specific worldview, one that's shaped by a deep distrust of institutions, mainstream media.
And a strong belief in alternative narratives.
Exactly.
He's connecting these seemingly unrelated events.
Yeah, like he's weaving them into this grand narrative.
Where Trump is this lone warrior fighting against these corrupt forces.
He's definitely appealing to a certain audience.
People who feel disillusioned, maybe even betrayed by the system.
Right. And this narrative offers them a sense of understanding, maybe even belonging.
Like they're not alone in seeing the world this way.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that popularity doesn't equal truth.
Right. Just because a lot of people believe something doesn't make it true.
We have to engage with these ideas critically, separate fact from fiction.
Be discerning consumers of information.
Absolutely. That's crucial in this day and age.
There's a lot to unpack here, and we'll continue this deep dive in the next part of the episode.
Yeah, there's more to come.
Stay with us. Okay, so we've gone through a lot with Dave and his theories, but I want to touch on something that piqued my interest. His views on Big Pharma.
Yeah, that's a big one for him.
He seems to really see Trump as like this champion who can take them on.
Yeah, he frames it as, David versus Goliath.
Right.
Front going up against this massive industry, trying to expose them.
And he believes that Big Pharma puts profits ahead of people, even suggesting that they suppress cures just to keep the money flowing.
It's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah, and it's worth acknowledging that there are legitimate concerns about Big Pharma's influence, right?
Oh,
Their pricing practices, their lobbying efforts.
all that, yeah.
I mean, it's understandable why some people might be skeptical,
So sure.
but is there any actual evidence to support this idea that they're suppressing cures?
That's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
There are definitely examples of unethical behavior within the industry,
Right.
but this idea that they're like hiding cures for diseases, that's a big jump.
It does seem like a stretch.
And it's often based on speculation and misinformation, unfortunately.
So how does Dave connect this back to Trump?
Well, he cites the detention of AstraZeneca's China head
Okay.
as a sign that, Big Pharma is becoming more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And he suggests that Trump's presidency could lead to more accountability within the industry.
Okay, so he sees Trump as this force for transparency and ethical behavior.
Right. Someone who can kind of, shake things up and break their grip on the healthcare system.
And he links this to RFK Jr. and his criticisms of the industry as well, right?
Yeah, RFK Jr. has become a bit of a controversial figure, though.
Right, because of his stance on vaccines.
Exactly. He's made claims linking vaccines to autism, which have been thoroughly debunked by scientists and medical experts.
Yeah, that's a dangerous path to go down.
It is. And, it's one thing to criticize Big Pharma's practices,
Yeah.
but it's another to spread misinformation that can harm public health.
Right, because vaccines have saved countless lives.
Absolutely. They're one of the most important public health interventions we have.
So promoting fear and distrust around vaccines is incredibly irresponsible.
It really is. And it's crucial to rely on credible sources of information, especially when it comes to our health.
Absolutely. And, it's concerning that someone with RFK Jr.'s platform is amplifying these debunked theories.
Right. And it feeds into that narrative that we've been talking about, this idea of a hidden truth being suppressed by those in power.
Yeah, it plays on people's fears and distrust of authority.
Exactly. And it can be very persuasive for those who are already predisposed to believe those things.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to this 10 Days of Darkness theory that Dave mentioned.
Oh, right. Towards the end of the episode.
It seems to be tied to QAnon.
Yeah, it's one of their core predictions.
For those who might not be familiar, can you give us a quick rundown of QAnon?
Sure. So QAnon is this online movement that promotes a whole range of conspiracy theories.
Right.
They believe in this deep state cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles.
Okay.
Who are controlling the world, and they see Trump as this messianic figure who's going to expose and defeat them.
So this 10 Days of Darkness theory, what exactly does that entail?
Well, they predict this period of Intense upheaval and chaos,
Mhm.
leading to a mass awakening and the triumph of good over evil.
So it's like apocalyptic, but also hopeful.
Yeah, I guess you could say that they believe it will involve mass arrests of corrupt officials,
Yeah.
potential riots, and the complete dismantling of the deep state.
So like unnecessary purge.
Yeah, a painful but ultimately transformative process, according to them.
And Dave claims that Trump has been secretly orchestrating all of
Like,
this.
he even suggests that Trump has been operating from Air Force One
What?
since leaving the White House in 2021.
That's a new one.
It is, and it's important to reiterate that there's no evidence to support any of these QAnon claims.
Right.
These theories are often self-sealing, so any evidence that contradicts them is just dismissed as part of the conspiracy.
It's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down.
It really can be. Believing in these theories can lead to isolation, extremism, even violence in some cases.
So it's crucial to be critical of these ideas, to evaluate information based on logic and evidence.
Yeah, and to be wary of sensationalized claims that play on our fears.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. It's been a journey.
We've explored conspiracy theories, economic predictions, these alternative narratives,
And it's clear that there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty out there.
which can make people more susceptible to these kinds of ideas, right?
Absolutely. When people are afraid, they're more likely to grasp onto anything that offers a sense of explanation or control.
So it's more important than ever to be discerning, to think critically, and to engage in respectful dialogue with those who might see things differently than we do.
I completely agree. Open-mindedness and critical thinking are essential, especially in this age of information overload.
Exactly. So don't just take everything you hear at face value.
Do your own research, question things, and form your own conclusions.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your deep dive. Keep exploring, stay curious, and most importantly, stay informed.